Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's event all about Year 1. I'm joined this afternoon with Miss Hannah Browne, who is our Year 1 year group leader. Good afternoon, Miss Browne.
Hello, everybody. Thanks, Mr. Flynn.
So we'll start with just showing you a picture of ourselves, in case you can't see us on the screen here. This is what we look like. Hopefully by now, most of you will have met at least one of us and be quite familiar with us. But, you know, one of the things we'd like to do today is pass on a little bit more information about how Year 1 works at Regent. But if you do have any further questions, if you see us at pickup time or about the site, we can chat to you as long as we're available to do so, obviously. Okay. So we're going to start very quickly with Miss Browne talking you through some of the differences between FS2 and Year 1 on the timetable. Over to you, Miss Browne.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. So obviously the main difference in timings, same time. So drop-off is between 7:15 and 7:45, and the pickup is 2:20 at the end of the day, Sunday through to Wednesday, and 1:20 on a Thursday. If your child arrives in the classroom after 7:45, they will be marked as late on the register. And during that half an hour slot, there'll be a challenge or an activity that is usually linked to our learning in school that the children will complete. This is time where the teacher will read with children one-to-one, support them in any areas, while the other children in the class will complete an independent challenge or activity. So at the moment, we're just practicing writing the date, our letter formation, our number formation, and some phonics work. So snack time is 9 till 9:20. The children bring in healthy snacks, and we remind the children to drink lots of water. Because of the COVID restrictions at the moment, we don't actually have a water fountain. So I have been putting on the class announcements just to make sure that it's a bottle of water that the children are bringing in, or 2 smaller bottles of water. And, you know, the adults around the classroom, teaching assistants and teachers will remind your child to drink lots of water because it is quite warm at the moment. Our lunchtime is 11:20 till 12:20. And again, the children will eat in the classrooms under the supervision of an adult, reminding them to keep eating, drink plenty of water. One thing that the children struggled with at the beginning was recognizing which was their snack and which was their lunch, because obviously in FS2 they would have just brought a snack into school. So hopefully a lot of children will be familiar now with what they should eat for their snack and what to save for their lunch. I know some parents put labels on things, which is really helpful for the children and the teachers actually as well. But just a reminder that we are a nut-free school, so please don't send in any snacks or anything for lunch that has nuts in, because we do have children with allergies in Year 1 and throughout the school. And then finally, most parents, or if not all parents, should have received a timetable through their class announcement from their teacher, which should highlight which days they have their specialist subjects, so music, Arabic, PE. At the moment, we're not swimming, but hopefully that will come later on this term. So at the moment, they are the specialist subjects they have. In terms of the rest of our timetable, we will have plotted when we do English, maths, science, for example. Things may swap and change around in the Year 1 curriculum, but we still cover what we need to cover in the week. But that is sort of our timetable. And if you've got any questions regarding anything on the timetable, just drop your teacher a message on Cecil. But you all should have had that in the past couple of weeks already.
Yeah, thank you, Miss Browne. I just think as you're talking there, thinking about the sorts of activities that children would do when they come in the morning, quite similar to FS. It's just perhaps the scale of activity is more at a Year 1 appropriate age. Even in FS2, one of the first things the children would do is write their name and practice writing their name formation on a whiteboard. And these skills just progress throughout the year. So that should be quite a familiar thing for children who have been with us previously. And yeah, the snack thing is always an interesting one in the first couple of weeks, which the adults often don't think about in advance, myself included. The children are going from 1 snack to 2 snacks, and quite often can eat everything before the first snack is done. So all these things hopefully are kind of settling now as we're in the 4th week of term. Okay, so we'll move on and talk about some of these routines. So there's been a couple of questions about some of the constraints with break time. And there are a few factors to include. Obviously, space is one of them, and particularly with the restrictions, which have been eased, but they're still with us. We are quite limited on the site with space. And prior to COVID, we were able to manage in different ways. But at the minute, the children still have to be within their groups, within their bubbles. Now, other constraints that have been introduced over the past couple of years include the temperature. Anywhere that's over 38 degrees cannot be accessed during that time. And more recently, just before COVID, the air quality index was something that we have to monitor and abide by. So at this time of the year, it has been a little bit tricky to achieve an outdoor play, and with limited indoor options as well. So the FS areas are being utilised after the FS children have gone home because they tend to be a bit cooler because they're shaded. And the nurse has started to monitor the thermometers and air quality machines around the site. And over the next few days, with the timings of the day, it should be possible that children will increase the amount of out-time play they get. And I know that is a big difference compared to being in and out most of the day in FS2. But they have got a slightly longer day. And although Miss Browne just shared the exact timings of the breaks with you, we are being quite flexible in the afternoons where if there is an opportunity for children to go get 20 minutes to have a run around, that we're encouraging teachers to do that, even in year 2. So although it might not necessarily be as regular as we'd like it to be at the minute, as the weather cools down, we'll be able to separate the pitch into different sections and maintain the bubbles and follow the guidance still with that. So yeah, we are continuously coming up with opportunities for children to have more play times, as well as balancing the curriculum needs as well. And that is possible because of the longer day. So as you'll know by now, Key Stage 1 spend a couple of hours longer in school compared to year in FS2 and FS1 previously. That does allow for lessons to be a bit more extended, particularly with some of the specialist lessons, including music being a 1-hour block instead of shorter sessions in FS2 with the 40-minute sessions for music and PE. So these things do come into effect. And of course, we're looking forward to swimming starting again, just finalising the recruitment that's needed for that to ensure the safe ratio of numbers. As you can imagine, that's a little bit tricky at the minute with all schools trying to do exactly the same thing. But we're there or thereabouts. We should be able to start swimming the next week or 2. One of the questions did mention swimming and the changing facilities. Additionally, that's one of the restrictions which we have to adhere to at the minute. So that there will be probably a slightly shorter lesson in the first instance to make sure that children have got ample opportunities to get changed and to dry correctly as much as possible. And that will increase, the lesson duration will increase as children become more independent with the changing, because we're very conscious that these children, although they may swim outside of school, will have not had a swimming lesson before now, because we'd usually begin swimming in the final term of FS1, pick that up quite quickly in FS2, but unfortunately that's not been possible for these children. So again, it's a balancing the needs of the children with the expectations of the curriculum to make sure that we've got something that's reasonable and giving children opportunities to swim. Other questions have been linked to the bubbles that are in place. Once we've had inspections from the KHDA, which is still roughly every week or so at the minute, to make sure we're in compliance with the restrictions, they're advising us that we could change the bubbles each week now, if needed. So that's not a guarantee that they will change each week. We do want to create some sort of stability and create relationships. But previously, if there'd maybe been issues with friendships, ideally we were having to wait until half terms to make sure that we were able to contact trace. At the minute, we're advised that if we need to, we can change the bubbles weekly, as long as we're recording who's within those bubbles. And one of the questions that we collected before the session today was regarding the expectations of Arabic. Now, again, this is something that has been affected by COVID. So previously, year ones will have had 4 40-minute sessions for non-natives and 4 60-minute sessions for native speakers. At the minute, that has been changed, so that comes into effect in year 2. So we have had to reduce our expectations slightly with Arabic. The children are currently having around an hour and 40 minutes a week instead of 160 minutes. So that is obviously about an hour less, if my maths is correct there. So that means that they can't cover the content as much as they would have done previously. So most of the emphasis in year 1 is developing the language and vocabulary and the songs and the games that were developed with Miss Farah and FS2. And Miss Farah would still teach many of the classes in year 1 and has got a big timetable commitment for that now as well. So in terms of expectations, year 2 is where we formally have to offer Arabic. So now it has shifted so that we're using year 1 to prepare children for that a little bit. So there is more flexibility, but it's still a big part of the timetable for us at Region. Okay. If there's not something that I haven't covered there specifically, or you've got further questions, please feel free to add something in, and we'll come back to it at the end and pick it up again.
Mr. Flynn, I'm just going to add in there, just before you move on, that teachers will let you know when swimming will take place. So we'll give you a heads up the week before and let you know exactly what day their swimming slot is, what to bring in. And just to reassure you that there will be plenty of adults to support your child in the pool, because they might be a little bit nervous as they've not done swimming in school yet, and to get them changed as well, which I'm sure will be a little bit of an ordeal for the first few weeks because they wouldn't have done it yet. So don't worry, there'll be plenty of adults to help around there. Just wanted to add that in.
Thank you, Miss Browne. And we also, we've normally, when children start in FS1 and FS2, the class teacher attends for the first few weeks to help that transition. And that's something that we're going to do in year 1 for as long as is needed. We haven't put time limit on that. It might be that it only takes a couple of weeks for the teacher to attend and assist with changing and supporting. It might be, it needs to be extended for 4 to 6 weeks. We won't know, and it might be different for each group. So we'll see how that works as well. Okay. Right. Back to you, Miss Browne.
Okay, so I'm just going to talk about the setup of the classroom and actually what happens in a year 1 classroom. So the actual physical look of the classroom is really similar to an FS2 classroom, where the children will have some areas where they can continue, have some continuous provision. So there might be some maths activities, some English activities, some role play activities, art activities that will be similar to what they did in FS2. The difference being the academic side of things will be a little bit more challenging. So, for example, we are starting to use capital letters in our sentences. So that will be one of the activities for this week for the children to access and independently have a go at. But in terms of this classroom setup, it is very, very similar to an FS2 classroom. The children will all have a table and a chair to sit at, and they will be expected to do that a little more than what they would have done in an FS2 classroom, just because sometimes we will do group work and sometimes we will do whole class work. So if it's a science experiment, for example, we might talk about it all together as a whole class, and then we will split off into groups. Positive education, for example, we might do that whole class as well. That might be a little bit different to what they were used to in FS2, where a lot of the work would have been done in groups. But the children are really settled with that now, and they're used to sort of the setup. So when they're all listening, they're all sat on their chairs, listening to their teacher at the front. And then when the teacher pulls groups to one side to do their work, the other children will be accessing the areas independently. Sometimes uploading their own evidence on Seesaw, or the teaching assistant or myself or the teacher will be helping them do that as well. Excuse me, sorry. So most of you should be used to Seesaw now and should have had that in FS2. For those new parents or parents who are not used to that, you should have got a login code, so you are able to see the learning from in school. It's quite nice that you can see the pictures that they've uploaded and have a chat about what they had to do for that activity. And teachers will make sure that that is updated, every couple of days, so you can see what they're up to in school. iPads, so they will have had access to iPads in FS2. The way we use them in year 1 is slightly different. We'll have Raz Kids, which is an online platform to read books. You all should have received a login for that, so you can access that at home as well. The children are also able to scan QR codes that are linked to our learning, and they're sort of dotted around the classroom or on our display board. So that will have links or tutorials or games that are linked to the current learning. The children are not allowed on YouTube or not allowed on playing on games or anything. They are all educational sites that we have already uploaded for the children. So there's no need to worry about that. And finally, we had a question about class dojos. So they're a bit like house points where the children can work towards making good choices, doing good things, and they will get rewarded with dojo points. They have a little monster on the screen. The children love changing them. So usually the teacher sets up a challenge. Once you reach a certain amount, you can change your dojo monster. So yeah, they may be rewarded points for completing reading at home, a piece of independent writing. If they're trying hard with their number formation, it could be anything. It could be holding a door open for someone and showing kindness. So the teacher rewards children for making good choices, and their specialist teachers are also linked to those. So we work across the whole school. Their teachers will reward them with dojo points as well. I think that's everything about our classroom, and I don't think there's anything that we've missed from the questions. Mr. Flynn, can you think of anything that I've not spoken about?
Only that teachers get really frustrated when they try and have a system with class dojos, and I come in and give a child 5 dojos or 10 dojos for a piece of work that I think is fantastic. But I'm sure, class dojos, it's not really something that we've adopted officially, but it's sort of become quite consistent across Key Stage 1, and it's used, like say, Miss Browne, and lots of specialist lessons now, and children have really responded to it. So it helps maintain some high expectations. So it's something we're going to tap into for sure. So yeah, thank you for that summary of the classroom there. So we had a few questions about homework. So obviously there's some logistical things here in terms of the timelines that the spelling's being sent out weekly, every Thursday, and I think teachers have slightly different ways of doing that, but essentially they're sent out every week, and they are quite tightly linked nearly all of the time, if not all of the time, to the phonics that the children have been learning in school. So the children will be grouped according to where they're working, and that works for their phonics sessions each day, and it works for their spellings. So I think there's a couple of things from the questions that I've submitted before, which was a little bit maybe unsure as to why these, such a start to the year with 4 weeks in, and we've already done spelling tests and things like that. But the big difference, I suppose, between Key Stage 1 and FS is, first of all, they have 2 different curriculums, but there is an expectation that it's quite systematic. And what that does is helps the teachers assess and to know that these children are quite quickly ready to move on to a different sound or a different group of words. And that regular practice means that children can start to apply things in their writing. And ultimately, the point of the phonics and instruction and the reading and spelling practice is that children become more confident, fluent writers. So that is something we encourage. Children generally, in my experience, are quite keen to do that. There's a lot of research to suggest that low stakes testing, such as this, can lead to better memory and recall, particularly with young learners. And there are some elements of rote learning with it, but most of the words would fit into a pattern where possible. I mean, there are some exceptions because the English language is sometimes pretty difficult to learn with the exceptions, but most of them would follow the same sort of pattern that children become familiar with over the week, and we're just seeing where they are with it so we can adapt their learning for the next week as well. So that's the kind of the purpose of the spellings. Currently, we're just sending out book bans, 2 book bans a week, and they need to come home every day, and they come back to school at least on the library day, or if they've been read, they can be changed. You might be aware that our library is undergoing a bit of a transformation at the moment. Once the new library, or both new libraries, sorry, there's more than one, are finished, which will hopefully be in the next few weeks, we will be able to offer also a library books, go with the banned books, and increase the frequency in which the books can be changed. Again, we're compliant with COVID restrictions and the limitations of the temporary libraries at the minute. So we hope that situation will continue to improve over the coming weeks. There's also a few questions about who should be doing the homework, which for me should always be the student. But I also appreciate the time constraints that might cause. So ideally, the children will be able to access the work themselves because it's set at a roughly appropriate level. It should sometimes be a little bit challenging, but mostly done by the children themselves. If you're having specific problems with that should always be the class teacher, and they will be able to assist with that and give you some support and guidance of how to help the child, or maybe just using the class teacher's name or the class teacher knowing that the child's maybe a bit more reluctant at home. They have conversations to make the children aware that, you know, they've got high expectations, but also they can support as well. And within that, the class announcement that comes out every week will always have a summary of the learning from that week, some suggestions perhaps about how to practice at home, or guidance about what has been taught that week so that it could be topped up at home, whether that's, you know, counting in 5s, which could be practiced by chanting, or just a little quizzing on the way into school, or if it's writing particular styles, it might be, you know, writing a letter to someone, which you might try and practice at home if you had time or was interested in doing so. So within the weekly message, there should be some things linked to key dates and important things, that reminders that are coming up, but also a good summary of what's been happening in the previous few days as well. Okay. So within that, the CISO announcement, we've got a bit of duplication there. That's there every week. That should be kind of the cornerstone of the communication, really. I know you receive lots of communication from the VLE, some of which is directly from us, some of which is from maybe some of our partners. But the teacher's main method of communicating with you at Key Stage 1 and Year 1 especially will probably be Seesaw. And with that, it's a bit of maybe a health warning, is that, you know, when necessary, please use Seesaw. We don't want you to not use it. But teachers are teaching most of the day. So generally, they will only get a chance to reply to you during that first break or lunchtimes. They're teaching nearly all the day. There are some non-contact times where they're not with the class, when there's PE and swimming and so on. But Year 1 teachers probably have one of the highest contact rates of all teachers in school, due to the extended hours and less developed offering of specialists because of the age of the children. So just kind of be mindful of that, really, that they're not going to be able to respond straight away. If there's something urgent that needs doing in that moment, you can contact the school main office and they'll be able to assist you. If there's something about a reminder for, you know, the books come in, that's something they can pick up and respond throughout the day. If there's something that, you know, you can check in as well at pickup times, but try not to engage in a conversation that might take 5 or 10 minutes during pickup time. If you're just checking in to say hello, thank you for sharing this thing of the day, asking how the day went, that's fine. But try not to engage teachers in a 5-10 minute conversation about the progress so far. I know that some of you maybe don't get a chance to pick up too often, but where possible, you'll be able to find times where teachers might be able to pick up a phone and have a conversation with you rather than doing it all at pickup times. So just trying to find that balance, really. We want to be able to communicate with you in a way that supports your child, but it has to be sustainable for the teachers as well, so that they've got time to develop the children's learning as well. Okay, so anything really, really urgent, please, early pickups and things like that, you can coordinate with the front office at the school. Stuff that is just general, you can maybe send a message and try and get a bit of feedback. If you want a longer conversation, contact the teacher directly and try and find a mutual time to do so. Obviously, we will have the first parents' evening coming up in a few weeks' time now. Other than that, you'll get regular feedback through reports and things like that as well. And Seesaw, the posts that are on there as well, they're a great way of engaging with your child's learning and asking the child what they have been learning and showing them their learning and talking to them about the maths concept that they've been practicing at school. And rather than saying, what have you learned today or how was your day, you can say, I saw that you did some fantastic handwriting this morning. Your phonics work's been brilliant this week. And just letting them know that you've got eyes on their learning, you can see their progress as well, is quite reassuring for them. Okay. So I know I've done a lot of talking there. There's some questions coming up here. So in year 1, the Arabic classes for native and non-native used to be split, but currently not. So that is something that as the children transition into year 2, it has to be considered when we look at the groupings for going into year 2. But normally, before COVID, we would split in year 1. At the minute, we're not having to. That could change for next year, but it shouldn't affect this cohort right now. Okay. Similarly with that, what happened during the year after COVID, because the Arabic curriculum wasn't considered to be completed, the children who were studying in year 1 stayed with that curriculum and it became the year 2 curriculum, year 2 became the year 3 curriculum, and so on. So as I understand it, that there is no such curriculum for year 1 at the minute because it's mandatory now from year 2. I could be wrong. So what I will do with that one is I'll go check in with some of our Arabic leaders just to double check that. But that is my understanding after the events of the past 18 months. That's where we're at with that. There is no core text curriculum for the Arabic for year 1 at the minute. So generally what we do is, like as mentioned before, it's a lot of vocabulary, becoming familiar with the alphabet, that sort of activities that are happening there. So with this one, in year 1, the environment lends itself quite nicely to having different activities in, so that we are encouraging children to become a bit more familiar with the language, and it's quite small steps. They'll sing songs, recognize letters, and I know for the Arabic language, the formation and placement of letters can determine the word. So they spend a lot of time developing that, and even when they come into year 2 and 3, there's a lot of development on the alphabet and the different variations that can create the beginnings and end sounds of words as well. So there is a lot of time, first of all, to support children, because this non-mandatory period before year 2 is quite flexible with content. Okay, so the idea of catching up, I know, kind of makes sense, but generally the teaching of Arabic at this age is a lot of games, a lot of songs, which children can join into and pick up relatively easily, compared to not so much expectations on forming language and writing and so on until they're much older. Okay. Yeah, so the question about the reading. So when it comes to language, children need to be exposed to it to kind of pick it up. So the level, the lowest one that they bring home for most children will be the level they're kind of working at or around. And the next one up is what most children will be bringing home. So that kind of works twofold, really. It gives children the opportunity to access the language. It also helps the parents understand that that's where they're at. Previously, if we'd send home 2 of the same level, a lot of the feedback we get from parents is I think they're ready to move on to the next level without knowing what it is. So there should be perhaps a little bit of parental input with that, and children would typically be able to read anywhere between 50 and 70% of that next level independently. They'll pick up some of the high frequency words, they'll recognize some of the characters' names because they're quite repetitive, and they might need support with maybe, kind of 20, 30% at least of the language which might be unfamiliar, and we can break that down into the phonics that they would know and sound those words out, and then they become more familiar with them again. But I know sometimes that could be too tricky too soon. So again, it's just a conversation with the class teacher. If you feel between you, the child, and the class teacher that it might benefit from a short period of time where you just have two banned books at the same level, then that's okay as well. And as we build the confidence and the fluency, we can reintroduce a high level of challenge. But generally, most children will be able to access most of those books themselves. Yes, children will get changed. And as I mentioned earlier, I think as this is their first time swimming in school, we might need to adapt the time given to the lesson and focus on developing the independence of the children with changing and making sure that they are changed and dried as much as possible, especially as the children have not had that opportunity before. Miss Browne, do you want to answer one?
Yeah, so at the moment they have a 40-minute PE session and a 1-hour swimming session when that starts. So at the moment, obviously, the children aren't swimming, so they are timetabled to 2 PE lessons a week, a 1-hour slot and a 40-minute slot.
So I believe that's all the questions. So hopefully, if you didn't know already, you know what I look like and you know what Miss Browne looks like. You can approach us at pickup times when we're available to have a chat with any queries. But again, you've got great access to the class teacher through Seesaw, and they will get back to most things as soon as possible when they're not in contact with the children. Any other questions and concerns that you might have, the class teacher will be able to answer nearly everything, certainly to do with the curriculum. They might not be so sure in terms of if it's to do with joining the school or documentation, but they would certainly know the right person to ask. So they will be your main point of contact for the year. And I know you don't see them at drop-off and pick-up like you would in FS2, but you should see them at pick-up every day if you're the one picking up. But again, like I said earlier, if that's not how your situation works and that you don't often pick up, then teachers are quite flexible with supporting you and giving you as much feedback as possible at regular intervals, and even if that's not in line with the rhythm of parents' evenings and such that reports that already exist. So thank you for your time today. Thank you, Miss Browne. Thank you for those of you who joined us, and we look forward to seeing you today, tomorrow, for the rest of the academic year going forward.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your evenings.